Hello, my dear sisters and brothers. Welcome. My name's Andre Yachat, and welcome to The Bright Side here on Catholic SG Radio. Now, on The Bright Side, we glorify God with stories of faith and hope, and even by the work that we do. Joining us on the program today is Michael Leong, and Michael is an architect with more than 20 years of practice in the public and private sector. He's founding director of the Catholic Architectural Guild, a council member of the Archdiocese Land and Properties Singapore, or better known as ALPS, and a council member of Care4Creation with Caritas. And he's also a catechist with the OLPS RCIA program. Mike, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Okay, I just want to ask you, or I would just want to start off saying this. Recently, we learnt that the Catholic Architectural Guild, or CAG, right, released a 74-page book filled with illustrations and photographs, and that book is entitled Care4Creation, The Designer's Response to Laudato Si. Now, I understand that the Guild also managed to give a copy of this book to Pope Francis.
Yes, we did.
I don't know how you guys did that, but well done. But let me ask you, what is the very purpose of this book, Care4Creation, and to whom is it targeted at?
Right, Andre. So there's a little bit of history to how this book came about. And if you were to rewind a little bit back to 2019, when we started the Guild, the CAG came together in 2019 wanting to have the group of Catholics who happen to be architects coming together to form a guild to see what is it that our ministry and our mission is. And, so we formed the guild back then, and that was already when Laudato Si was already released, because it was released back in 2015. And it was obviously something that we were all kind of aware of. So when we came together, we did not put a lot of emphasis on Laudato Si itself. But in 2021, Laudato Si was actually released as an action platform by the Vatican.
Right.
So that was something quite momentous, because when we saw the action platform released, we realized that there's actually something that we should do, at least as a response. So in 2021, I actually sat down with Father J.P. Tan, who was our spiritual director at that time, and broached the subject to him and said, Father, we should have a response, right, to our Holy Father's encyclical, especially if you read into it. There's so much that talks about the environment.
Yes.
So as architects, as the CAG, isn't there something that we should do about it? And so I asked him, should we write a book for the parishes so that the parish buildings or the parish committees who are running the buildings know how to run the building sustainably?
Yeah.
And Father JP looked at me and said, that's a good idea, but raise the bar. And the book should be for the industry, not just for the parish itself.
Right.
And that is really almost an evangelical tool that we can, present what the church's position is to the entire industry. So that's really how it started.
Wow.
So we came together in 2021, formed a committee. Over the last 3 years, it was not an easy journey because every one of us is a volunteer.
Yeah.
So we're just using our spare time to do this. And sometime early part of this year, when we came together to try to wrap up the project, Father JP shared with us about the Pope's visit. And that, was not really, a public information at the time. And everybody got very excited, of course.
I'm
and
sure.
That gave us an impetus to really, run to the finishing line.
Absolutely.
And complete it before September. So we made it in August and published the book and managed to speak to the PFS committee.
Right.
Yeah, to
That's
consider, allowing this to be a gift to the Holy Father.
Wonderful,
That's
wonderful, fantastic. Now, I just want to ask you, you talked about this book possibly being a tool for evangelization. Have you had the opportunity to share the thoughts and ideas on different fora outside of the Catholic Church?
Yes. In a way, we launched it last week at the Caritas at Nakape Village, right?
That's
so
right.
at the launch itself, we had invited the president of both Singapore Institute of Architects as well as the president of RADAS.
Ah,
Yes, yeah, and these are, as you know, if you're in the industry, some of the key institutions that are driving the entire industry
Yes.
and the standard of practice
right.
for both consultants in the architectural field as well as developers for RADAS.
Right.
So we presented the book to them, and the presidents of these two institutions, they had very good things to say about the book.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and I think it helps very much that what we are saying in the book is also very much aligned with what they are doing. For instance, the SIA has a green book, which is also very much...
SIA?
Singapore Institute of Architects.
Ah, okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Sorry, our listeners might not be
That's
so
right,
familiar.
yeah. And so SIA also has a publication about how we should be designing sustainably. And so that is very much in line with what the SIA is trying to do. But what we are trying to complement is really the fact that Laudato Si has been labeled as the moral charter of sustainable development. And that was something that the UNSDG, which is United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, has actually explicitly mentioned.
Wow.
Which is actually quite significant if you think about it.
Yes.
Because a lot of these technical documents about sustainable design are quite technical, and maybe that's it. That's about it, right? But what is so important is actually the ethical underlining of
Yes.
the entire sustainability effort. And so what the Pope Francis encyclical doing is very much is really to insert that layer of ethical thinking behind all the actions that we are doing in terms of design, development, and that is so important because the trend of how global warming is developing is not exactly optimistic. If you have been following how temperatures are rising around the world, it is actually going to miss the target that we have set out to do. And so that's
worrying, actually.
It's quite worrying. So we do want to look at the root cause.
Yeah.
What is it that we are not doing enough? What is it that we are not solving yet? And it could be really the ethical aspect of things. Yeah. So if we can see the connectedness and what we are doing affecting especially the poor communities, right?
Yeah.
That may make a difference. So that's really what we are hoping to bring across, at least as a message in the book, so that it kind of help people to understand why is it that we should be exercising sustainably.
Right. Yeah. Which brings me to my next question, actually, for you. What are the challenges that designers, architects, and engineers face when putting together ideas for a new building or a cluster of buildings, for that matter?
Yeah, I think there are so many challenges, having practiced for more than 20 years. But I think if you were to try to sum everything up, the pressure of time is a very real issue, especially in a very highly intensive industry like construction industry and development industry, where the investment cost is really a key driver behind the ROIs, behind the ability to use the building for the function that is designed for.
Right. And time taken as well, I would suppose, right?
Yeah, and the cost that has been invested. So all that created a lot of pressure for everybody in this industry to deliver buildings.
Yes.
Which is why when we are in the process of designing a building, the delivery of the building is sometimes, the key focus. And the buildings that are to be delivered are sometimes considered as end products. But they are really not end products. They are really the start of 80, 100 years of operation of a building.
Actually, that's so, yeah.
Yeah, and so if you think about it, and I mean, many studies have shown that the lifespan of the building actually has a lot more impact on the environment.
Yes.
Up to 80 to 90% of a building's lifespan is actually contributing to the entire lifespan of the building.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the construction itself may take up 10, 20% if you compare it to the entire lifespan. So it is so important for us to think about how a building is almost like a living creation.
That's
and
right.
How it contributes or how it takes away from the people that is occupying the building.
So its impact in the environment as well as the lives of the people around it.
Exactly. From the day that is completed.
We don't think about that, right?
We don't think about it because the focus is always on finishing the building, finishing the product.
Yeah.
Yeah, and therefore that is the nature, the culture of the industry. And that's something that we really need to change, because I think it's so important to realize that buildings are actually part of the creation that we are contributing to. Pope Francis also speaks about how the whole creation process is not completed, and we are all part of the co-creation process together with him. So if you think about that, the buildings that we are creating actually is part of creation.
Yes.
Yeah, and so if we are creating these buildings together with, the teaching of the church, the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, then we should also be thinking about them contributing to the world that we are living in.
Yes.
And that's so important for us to realize.
And now there is this race. Well, I mean, there is this movement towards looking for materials that are, I suppose, lighter, that are more environmentally friendly, right? And I mean, now we see buildings with a lot of plants outside and all that, and I think that also maybe helps a little bit for us to be a little bit more, I suppose, aware that we can also play a part in that.
Certainly, yeah. I think there are various aspects to that. There is the visual and educational aspect,
Correct.
where it is important to show people that buildings do not need to be, hard and square and glassy. There is a lot of elements of nature that we can bring into the building,
Yes.
which is really good. And I think Singapore has done an amazing job in terms of still being able to integrate a lot of nature into our very hard structures around the city. At the same time, we do have to go beyond the surface to look at how plants are integrated into the building. Sometimes they do more damage than good.
That's right.
Yes,
that's
yeah.
right.
If we do not know how to do it properly,
Correct.
For example, if we do not actually protect the structures from the aggressive roots of the plants,
That's right.
and make sure that we do not integrate plants in a way that actually makes it harder and maybe more dangerous for the maintenance staff to take care of them, then that actually can create more harm than good.
Yeah.
Which is why we need to talk to people who are really designing buildings and to make sure that, yes, the good intention is there,
Right.
but you need to do it correctly and you need to do it sustainably.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're looking at a building, actually, you need people who are really interoperable, right? Everybody has a part to play, and you can't do without the other, actually.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to ask you the next question, which is got to do with ethics, really. Because buildings, as we know, cost lots of money, right? And so how do we ensure that sustainability is a realistic goal rather than just an ideal, for that matter?
It's a very difficult question to answer, to be honest. And I think if you look at the trends of how global warming is actually developing, it can be a really complex issue. I think the term that some people in the industry are using is that this is a wicked problem.
It's a wicked problem.
Wicked problem, yeah. Wicked problem is a term coined in America, and it was used to describe problems that are really complicated.
Yeah.
You don't really know how it starts. You don't really know how to resolve it.
Right.
So, and then it's very dynamic. It keeps changing.
Yes.
Yeah. So the global warming and the whole climate change problem is a kind of wicked problem. And so ethics is really important when it comes to that. Yeah. I mentioned earlier how the UN SDG sees laudatosi as a moral charter.
Yes.
Yeah. And if you take some courses on UN SDG Academy, they in fact emphasize that in one of the key lessons, where we have to come from an ethical viewpoint to help people to realize that every single action that they are doing makes a difference to the entire development of the whole world. And the Pope talks about this thing called the ecological conversion, which is really important. And I think the ecological conversion really goes past that building scale, the city scale. It goes down to the individual scale, where what you and I decide to do in our everyday life, for example, cutting down meat consumption, cutting down energy consumption, deciding to use public transport a little bit more.
That's right.
Yeah, these are all baby steps. And if you think about it, it may not make a difference.
Yeah.
But because ethical is a personal decision. Ethical decisions are personal decisions.
Yes.
Yeah, we do it because we believe that it will help another person It will help our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And
That's
is
part of
what
our
we
Catholic
do.
social teachings,
It's
actually.
absolutely, yeah, that's right. So CST, or Catholic Social Teaching, is a very big part of laudatosi also, because there's a lot of alignment in what we are doing and how it affects the poor, how it affects the environment.
Yeah.
So I think the question of ethics is actually the fundamental part of the work that we are trying to do, where you are really trying to make that connection in people's mind. That every single action that we are doing, just deciding to eat fish rather than eating a piece of steak tonight, for example, right?
Right.
It makes a difference. It makes a real difference because a piece of steak is equivalent to maybe driving for 70 to 80 kilometers in a car.
Wow.
And a piece of fish is many times less.
Wow.
So small little actions like that, they all add up.
Yeah, but we don't think about that.
We don't think about it, and sometimes people are just not aware of that. And so I think the role that we all have to play, either as designers, architects, or a Catholic, who have the teaching of Laudato Si, is to go out like the 72 disciples today, right?
That's right.
Yeah, some people may not listen to you. Yeah, they will ask you to leave their house.
Correct.
But for those people who listen, it makes a difference. So every single one of us has that mission to deliver.
Any idea, you all presented the Holy Father this wonderful book that you all created and came up with. Any idea of what his response has been to the book?
Not yet so far.
Right.
It has only been a couple of weeks.
Okay.
And he's really busy, visiting Belgium
that's right.
and other places.
That's right.
So I think it will take some time for them to respond to us. But the hope is really that if this book makes a difference in the Vatican, and if that can be, in a way, propagated around the entire Catholic community, we are talking about 1.3 billion people.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And around the world, there must be tens, if not hundreds of thousands of buildings that is under the church.
Right.
Yeah. And within our small Archdiocese itself, we have already quite a few.
Absolutely.
So if the message can be propagated from, the leader or the leadership of the church, and everybody decide to do something, even if it's just as small as deciding not to tear down the building, and leave it for the next 5 years and then just do renovation.
Right.
All these things add up to the carbon footprint, to the global warming, and eventually the goals of Laudato Si. So hopefully that will become something that we can continue to hear from the Pope.
Yeah. Now, this idea of, at this point, people think of this throwaway culture, which His Eminence has also spoken about, the Holy Father has spoken about. And we are actually very much aware of this throwaway culture. Yeah. But how do we run against that grain, and what kind of role can the individual play?
I think it's still coming back to the idea of ecological conversion. Yeah, where if we are able to see that there's value in everything that we are using, the buildings that we are using, the dishes that we are using, the people that we are working with, that there are value, there is intrinsic value that has been imbued by God in each of them, because they are all the image of God, because if they are part of creation of God, they all bear the image of God. So if that is something that we can be conscious of, then I think the kind of decisions that we make on a daily basis are different. And I'm talking about both animate and inanimate objects. Yeah, down to things like, for example, if you see a crack on the wall.
Right.
For a building, right?
Interesting.
A small crack on the wall, that might just be a plaster crack. Do you kind of just say that none of my business, I will let, the maintenance people do it? Or do you actually have a bit of a concern about it and perhaps start to try to do something about it? Because a small little crack like this can actually allow water seepage.
Right.
For instance.
Yes.
And water seepage can actually go
because it's like a membrane breaking and then water getting in.
Yeah, that's the best point of water entering. It's a bit like sin entering our life.
Yeah.
Right?
Well said.
Yeah, and it can be the beginning of a very expensive renovation later on or repair later on. So
Yes.
when it starts to get in, maybe the plasters will start to break down.
Correct.
Water starts to go in, and you see bubbling on the surface.
That's right.
Yeah, which is typically how these things happen.
That is already an issue.
Yeah, and then when buildings like this happen, you get issues of mold
Yes.
forming, and becomes a health and wellness issue
Correct.
for the occupants.
Correct.
Yeah.
And
But
people don't realize that.
People don't realize, and people may not do anything about it, even if they realize it.
Yeah.
Because to them, it's not connected to my responsibility.
Correct.
That's when the interconnectedness is so important. If I see everything that is around me being connected to me and my
Yes.
actions, then I will have some care for the creation that is around us. And
Correct.
that care is something that may not be there all the time. So I think we do want to kind of just remind people, hey, care for the creation around us. So everything that is around you is part of creation.
Yes.
And you have a care for this creation. And it makes a difference to everything that we are talking about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And because many of us, let's say, for instance, we go to church, and these buildings that we are in every weekend, or even during the week when we go for meetings or stuff like that, should become our concern,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, and we should talk to consultants if we are not sure what can be done about that.
Right.
A lot of these things have short-term and long-term
Effects.
benefits.
Ah.
Yeah. So, and I think the tendency for us is always to look at the short-term. This is just human nature, right?
Yeah, yeah.
How do I cut down the cost? How do I, spend less on perhaps an aircon system, that may actually be using more energy in the long run?
Actually,
Yeah, because the 2 ticks are cheaper than the 4 ticks.
yes.
The aircon systems, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so why do I want to buy the 4-tick aircon?
Yeah.
Yeah, but because if you start counting how much the aircon is going to save you over the long run,
Right.
yeah, and how much carbon footprint or how much less carbon footprint is going to introduce to the environment,
Correct.
then that makes a lot of sense. So the difference is to see the difference between cost and value.
Right.
Yeah, we don't sometimes see the difference easily.
Right.
And the nature and the tendency is for us to see the cost. So we focus on reducing costs, but we forget about enhancing the value because sometimes, they are kind of trade-offs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the more important thing that we should be focusing now in this day and age, in this crisis, right, is really the long-term value
Yeah.
of every investment that we are making. So some investment may be higher in the capex,
Yes.
in the first 3 years.
That's right. Yeah.
But if you look at the OPEX,
Your capital expenditure, yes.
all right, operational expenditure,
Yeah.
it saves you a lot more money. So being sustainable is not always a sacrifice.
Yes.
And that is a mindset that we sometimes have that, in order to be sustainable, I have to make this sacrifice, I have to do this and that. And it's not always the case.
Right.
So I think the other thing that we are trying to help people to see is that being sustainable is also something that can be good for your bank account,
Absolutely.
good for your health and wellness, which eventually affects the bank account.
Absolutely.
But I think the spirituality of being sustainable is the most important thing that we should try to remember.
Yeah.
That this is really our core. This is our call to protect the environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, to protect what God has given us.
For you, before we let you go, you've been in the practice for more than 20 years now. What is your personal goal or ambition, when it comes to this idea of care for creation in the environments that we are living in?
I think it is really important for our works to have a social impact. And a lot of works that we see around are really impressive in terms of how they look visually. But we should focus on how they are able to inspire people occupying the building to really care for the environment that they are in. There is this term called place making, which is actually creating a place that has a strong sense of identity where people will enjoy.
That's right.
But we are now moving from place making to place keeping and place caring. And that is very important because it starts to create an ownership between people and the environment.
That's right.
Right. And so I think we as architects can only do that much because,
Yes.
we have 2 to 3 years to work on a project
Yeah.
and we have to move on to the next project.
You initiate.
You initiate, you
Right.
plant the seed,
Right.
Yeah, and the people who are using your buildings, they have to be the one that care for the building, and they feel that this is also their building, their ownership, their baby. And I think to the extent that we are able to instill that kind of ownership to the users,
Yeah.
We will not be able to get as much out of building as possible.
How can we get people involved in the buildings that we occupy before maybe even the building is put up?
Through co-creation. And co-creation is such a powerful tool that we have tried before in some projects, where even before the design is completed, you get the people who are involved, who will be using the building,
Right.
yeah, to be part of the design process.
That's great.
Yes, and because of that, they actually feel that, hey, this is also my effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to make sure that my effort put down into this project doesn't go down the drain. And so I want to, make sure that it's well taken care of. I want to come and organize it and all that. Even though the design team is not around anymore,
Yes.
it doesn't matter because, I was part of the design process.
Correct.
Yeah, so the idea of co-creation is really powerful.
Wow.
And, yeah, I think we need to also see that we are co-creating the environment, the entire world together with God. Because as long as we can continue to see that, we
Yeah.
will continue to care for it.
Yeah. So, dear sisters and brothers, you and I have a role to play. We certainly do. And then, like I said, it doesn't mean we go into our parishes blind, right? And I'm sure we see cracks in the walls, we on the floor, even the pews sometimes not aligned, something or other, right? You can tell somebody is going to get pinched very soon because of a particular screw that's not tightened or something like that. So all of us have a part to play, and especially as Mike mentioned, in the areas that we are going to be occupying or using, that can be under our care, and we can take care of that. And certainly, as we take care of that, we also take care of our sisters and brothers as well.
Absolutely.
Right? Mike, thank you so much for coming in and enlightening us also, and sharing with us as well your thoughts on this care for creation. So Mike is an architect with more than 20 years of experience, both in the public and private sector, and he's a founding director of the Catholic Architectural Guild and a council member of the Archdiocese Land and Properties Singapore, which is the body actually that looks after all the properties and the buildings in the Archdiocese, and together with Wei and his team, right? And he's also, Mike's also a council member of the Care for Creation with Caritas, and he's also a catechist, and I know why now you're a catechist. You're just a very natural speaker and a very natural teacher.
Praise the Lord.
So thank you so much for being with us. So The Bright Side, dear sisters and brothers, is broadcast every alternate Thursdays at 8:30 a.m. right now, and with the encore broadcast at 8 p.m. tonight, and also it'll be on at 5 p.m. tomorrow as well. Alternatively, you can catch the podcast of this episode on our Catholic SG Radio app, on Spotify, or on Apple Podcasts. You can also watch this episode on our YouTube channel, yes, at catholic.sg. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Andre Achat. You take care. God bless and love you all. Bye-bye now.